each other and we just said, where are the women? Why do women not know that this is an industry that they can also play in, that they can also invest in, and that there's opportunity for? And going through this process, I myself learned a lot about myself as an investor, and that in Canada, I was an accredited investor, which meant that I could have access to private placements. I could have opportunities that others didn't necessarily have if you're just going and buying on the public markets. And so I started thinking about how do we get more women engaged in this? We know in the mining industry, it's a high income, you're a high earner, especially when you are in those more senior roles. We're the ones that are in this risky, industry all the time. People, when they look at mining who don't know about mining and aren't involved in mining, just see it as too risky of an investment. It's too volatile. You don't want to do it. Where we're the ones that manage those risks every day, we identify those risks, we look at what those risks look like. And I thought, I bet women just don't know. I bet they just don't know that this is the opportunity. I very much, like a lot of women I've talked to since, I got my shares and I got my options through my compensation package and bonus package every year. That was pretty much all I knew up until a few years ago about what investing could look like for me, or what having stocks or shares or options could look like for me. And so we started doing a lot of research and we started realizing that, yeah, women just did not know that they could play at this
This
space.
area used to be one of the most prolific and historic producers of silver gold from the 16, 17, 1800s. It was once known as the jewel of the Spanish crown of New Spain in the 17, 1800s. So really, really significant. There's actually 8 former producing mines within the project boundary. Very rare for a junior of our size to have the ability to explore 8 former mines. You maybe have 1 or 2, but we literally have the whole district, which is really exciting for us. So the plan is, we've done a bunch of mapping. We're continuing to do that. We have 3 full-time field geologists, so out in the field, we're finding veins all the time. And what we want to do is generate income from mining, which we're doing right now. Once we have about 3 million US that we have earmarked, we really want to give it a really good pass. 3 million US would give us about 20 to 25,000 meters of drilling, diamond drilling. Where we are in Mexico, it's quite inexpensive, which is great, and really give it a proper first pass. There's 2 areas in particular that we really want to start to drill. That's the East District, and there's 2 mines located there. One is Mina de Agua, and the other one is El Rincon. So Mina de Agua shut down in about 1910, had about 10,000 employees during its peak, one of these old kind of colonial mine styles. They got a little bit too deep, flooded, and nothing's happened ever since then. El Rincon, something similar. El Rincon, they got a little bit too deep. It flooded in 1930, and nothing's happened since then. However, at El Rincon, the head grade of the final 10 years of production was about 6.5 grams gold and 850 grams silver. So some of the highest grade material I've ever seen. That's the prize, and that's what we're really excited
Again,
for.
going back to the insurance wording, do our wordings need to change because of the new way of mining? And a good example of that is that, and I talked earlier about insurance companies drawing that line of futurity on certain things that a mining company does. And one of those would be remote control boggers in an open stope underground. The reason why they're remote controlled is because of the health and safety exposure to putting a person in that situation where a roof fall is likely to result in a fatality. So those boggers are remotely controlled. So we don't want to cover those. The insurance companies, when I'm talking about the transfer of risk, we don't think that is one of those risks that can be transferred to insurance companies, because if you're not going to put a man on that bogger, then why should we take on the risk? So that's the intent of that exclusion within the policy language, but it's not intended to be there for all remote controlled machinery equipment, because now that machinery equipment is being remotely controlled for operational and efficiency and productivity reasons, not because it's unsafe. So we have to go back and amend that policy language to give the mining companies the cover that they're
We
paying.
had 50 plus historical drill holes where every hole hit gold, and that told us, like, wow, okay, this is now, we have some grades 12 grams over 24, like a gram over 70 meters in drilling. So some really good open mineralization. And then there's also anomalies that haven't even been tested. And then the backdrop for all of this is that it's in the same mineral belt as the 5th largest undeveloped gold deposit in the world, that Barrick and Nova Gold own. It's called Donlin. It's 39 million ounces of gold. And what surprised me is that there's no other exploration company in and around us. And so the fact is this mineral belt can produce one deposit of that magnitude, there was just enough boxes ticked to make us sort of jump all in onto this asset. We introduced it to our largest, we had two large shareholders at that time, the Native Corporation and Crescat Capital. And Crescat went from a 10% owner in our company to 20% just based on this asset and the anticipation of drilling it. And so we just completed our second year of drilling and announced a brand new gold discovery, 65 meters of 1.2 grams. Within that was 6 meters of 6 grams and 1.5 meters of 21 grams. But the hole ended at 65 meters. So it's completely mineralized from top to bottom and carrying some really high grade gold and completely open. It's a kilometer-long target, and we're the first ones to ever drill it. So it is an exciting time, and I think we're finally cracking the code to this gold puzzle at our Flat Gold project. And this year's drilling campaign, has me sort of as a kid in Christmas morning. I can't wait to get in there again and flush out this new discovery, and also some of the existing drilling that's still wide open in every which direction.
I'm speaking crudely here, but it's largely correct. So where we can see the hot spots of the rocks and the cold spots of the non-metal, that will tell us whether or not we can throw those rocks away. As crazy as it sounds, when we look at material, we tend to take all of the material, crush it all down, and get a single measure of grade or an assay. What we're doing here is we're isolating the rocks at the largest size we can get our hands on to see whether all rocks are created equal. And XRT is one sensor that allows us to look into the rocks, through the rocks, to see where the metal is. And it's very interesting. It's very illuminating. As a researcher, it's fascinating to find out that metal is not equally distributed amongst all rocks. And with that knowledge, you can really ask yourself, why are we sending all of this to the tailings pond? So it's a disruptive technology, meaning to include it now into our flow sheets, people are just not ready for it.
Polymetallic nodules were really attractive because they're not attached to the surface. You can pick them up like you would pick up a rock in your yard. They have attractive mineralogies. They often have nickel, cobalt, rare earth minerals, manganese, titanium, a couple other minerals. And they occur on the abyssal plains, which are usually 4,000 or 5,000 meters deep. So we're talking about very, very deep water, zero sunlight, zero plants. None of the life forms that we're used to seeing in the ocean exist here. In fact, there's so little energy on the bottom of the ocean at these depths, and so little food, that most of what you find there is microscopic, and it occurs in the sediment or sometimes on the nodules themselves. So you can extract these nodules relatively easily because they're not attached, and because they're on the abyssal plains, you have relatively little life and relatively little biodiversity. There is biodiversity. It's just that it is much less than what you find in shallower waters and much less than you find in many of the terrestrial locations where we're mining these minerals.
It's a collaboration. As we discussed, a lot of the majors relinquished their exploration assets in the downturn, and it's we see it across the sector. And so now we're at a point where they lack those exploration opportunities. So they're coming back. You're seeing a lot of strategic mining investment, cash inflows into these companies that have good exploration targets, good exploration properties. If you look at the tenement holdings throughout these metal belts in the country, the belts are virtually all staked up. So there's no free ground available in these regions. And so if you spent the time over the last decade or two accumulating these assets, then you're in a good position to be able to assist and help the majors move these forward. But it's a collaboration, certainly, and we were at the forefront of something that's quite exciting. I mean, we're seeing copper over $5 right now. I mean, we knew it was going to get there. It's just a matter of when. And it looks like the future is friendly for supply demand economics on copper. So it's why we've always been focused on it. But we accumulate these portfolios when copper's at $2, and we attract partners where when it's up at these levels, and we pour money into testing.
Getting them to think about what around them comes from mining. Sat in the class, I'm explaining that the blocks that make the walls, are mined. The table legs are metal. They're mined. The filler in the paper that makes it all glossy, is from China clay. So, the toothpaste is also from China clay, and pharmaceuticals and things like that, So all these things that are mined in Cornwall are actually used in their day-to-day products. It's also explaining, like every kid now these days has access to an iPad or something similar. And, saying to them all of the components inside that make so they can play games and watch videos, all of that circuitry is all from copper and tin and all of the other rare minerals. So it's really getting them to embrace, actually, mining has produced almost everything around me.